We are up to the Chavav Amud Aleph. We're continuing the Braisa here, talking about women who are not suitable for their husbands and therefore they do not drink. And we're up to about 13, 14 lines on the bottom. But then the Braisa said, but these women who are suitable, for example, the wife of a mamzer, the wife of a ger, they do drink. So the Gemara is going to ask, aren't these all obvious? Asian mamzer, isn't that obvious? Why not? She's entitled to be married. She said, well, no. Maude, I would have thought, what's the purpose of drinking? So that she can go back to her husband. If she goes back to her husband, they'll produce more mamzelim. Maybe there's no reason to erase Hashem's name in order to enable that to happen. Maybe we shouldn't do that because we're erasing Hashem's name, and for what purpose? To have more mamzelim? Kamashlan? That no. That since they're permitted to be married, we go ahead and we erase. We go ahead with the whole procedure. Ages gave them and islands we don't disregard. As the Bach says, it doesn't really matter. Pshit isn't obvious. They're allowed to be married to each other. No, now they have a thought. It says, Dabra B'nai Yisrael. So speak to the Eden. The Logadim, comrades are not involved, included, Kamashalon, that they are. Says the Gemara, how do you know? Maybe B'nai Yisrael Taka means to exclude Gerim. Amarta Ribehu. The word, the Amarta is actually a riba coming to add. Even though before we said Amarta, it says Dabra speak, and Amarta again to include more. And we said it comes to include Narusa. And that and a shemeres yavam, that was that you can warn them, even though they don't drink, but you can warn them. Maybe the vav of the amarta comes to include now also gerim. So the Gemara further. It takes already raised on a rule. How come over here we say maybe takaso, and other places we just accept it as it is? The Tesa says a rule as follows: if it's an interpretation of a pasuk, so we say that's how it was handed down to us. That's tradition, and we can't ask a question. But if it's clear in the pasuk right here, Bnei Yisrael means Eden and not Gerim. So how do you know take to include Gerim? So we're entitled to ask that question. Aisha's kohen shoyse says it's obvious. Why shouldn't she drink? No, because I would have thought Pasuk says he loy nitfasa if she was not in any way raped, as soon as she's forbidden. But so we can learn clearly her nitfasa, but if she was raped, would tell her she permitted. So we're talking about somebody that difference whether she was coerced or not coerced. By H's kohen, it makes no difference. Either way, she's forbidden. Perhaps in this case, the Torah says that the wife of a kohen can never drink. She shouldn't go back to her husband, Kamashalon, because of flirtatious behavior, maybe. Kamashalon, that no. That there the same rules apply, and if she drinks and she's innocent, she goes back. Materis Labaila, she's permitted to go back to her husband if she turn out to be innocent. Shita, obviously, why not? I'm going to win a misnava to my body. She started to deteriorate. After she drank, she started to deteriorate, and she shouldn't go back to her husband. Why? Because misnavna, why? But kuamai, the word of proof that she's guilty. And Aisha didn't fall apart straight away because maybe she has a schus tailor. She performed some kind of a mitzvah. The misnava derech eborim. It wasn't the ordinary way, the stomach and the thighs. It was through the limbs. So, I would have thought really she's a zayin. Why did it go the normal way? The conventional way. The normal way. She was forced. Let's say she was raped. Well, if she would have been married to a kohen, it would have been us. So we would have thought that maybe in this case she shouldn't go back to her husband. And why not look at a punishment? She was raped. In the case of Israel, because remember, she behaved in a very promiscuous way. So maybe for that alone she should be punished. Kamashlan, that doesn't work that way. Aisha's Sadi is the wife of a Sadi's Shaisha, she drinks. So Rashi in the Mishnah told us that the wife of a Sadi's can drink because talking about a case where he became a Sadi's afterwards, later on, and because he became a Sadi's afterwards, so first she was the husband, he was the husband, and then she had an affair with somebody else. So therefore, her husband came first, and that's why she drinks. Pshita, obvious. I would have thought that he's not really, he cannot produce, he cannot have children. That doesn't matter. Why doesn't it matter? Because it's not so much about having children, more about being able to have intimacy. So according to this chart, the way Rashi learns here, it seems that even if he was a saris from the moment they got married, nevertheless, she still drinks. And then Rashi comes up with the Chiddush. Rashi says, when we say saris, that she can go back to saris is only saris chama, only if he was born that way. But if he became a saris later on, for example, he took some kind of a potion or he sterilized himself, then they now live together. And Taisa says he has no idea where does Rashi get the idea that if somebody sterilized themselves, she can no longer live with him. Says the Gemara. Says the Gemara further. They call Arayas mekanin. You could warn her off even to have relations with any of her close relatives. Shita, obviously, if she was suspicious, why not? I would have thought nidma, snapam. It says twice nidma, and we learn from here that she can no longer live with her husband, nor can she live with the person that she had the affair with. But if it's a relative, which anyway she's forbidden, so the second nidma is not applicable. So maybe there's no laws of sake of drinking. They commit only if this causes it to be forbidden to the other person. In the case of relatives, she's forbidden the kaima. She's forbidden beforehand. I would have thought it doesn't matter. Kamash Malan, that even so, the laws of Sotah apply, even though she was anyway forbidden to these relatives. Except the child. Why? Because Ish Amarachman, it says in the trade of Shachan, Ish only if a man, an adult. But like cotton, not if the accusee was or the accused was a minor. And then the Mishnah said, Ushe'ena Ish, if he's not a man. What if he's not a man? Lamute Mai. What are you coming to exclude? I was talking about a minor because we already said that. So what do we mean by ilema? Are we talking about lamute to exclude shachuv, somebody who's slightly impotent and therefore not capable of having an intimacy? But Amar Shmuel clearly said shachuv, that if somebody is slightly impotent, mekanin al yoda. Yes, you can warn her off from having relations with that person as well. Furthermore, if she had relations with a person who's slightly impotent, and he is somebody that's forbidden to live with her, then she is disqualified from eating truma. If just like if she lived with a goy or somebody that she's forbidden to marry a mamzer, she even for one night, one off, she can no longer marry a kohen. And so the same thing is, even if that person is slightly impotent, he asks her, and she can no longer eat truma, and so on. Now, the Gemara now explains that. The Pshita, very odd. The Gemara before said maybe it's coming to exclude the shachuv. Now we're saying that to be mekana a shachuv, obviously you could. It's a pretty drastic change of attitude. Anyway, I would have thought it says in the pasuk v'shachat ish oisa shichva zera. It says in the pasuk that a person slept with her. With a shichva zera, when this person is slightly impotent, is not really capable of producing shichva zera, or very few. Kamashlan, that he still comes to asa. That's why it's a chiddush. Again, obviously, no. I would have thought again, we use the expression zara. And when it says yachal on double, that she becomes asa, and also the children. That means she has to be able to produce. This man has to be able to produce children with her. This person is impotent, slightly impotent, not capable of producing children. That nevertheless there is he asks her. The Elul so goes back to Mishnah. Mishnah says to exclude someone who's not an ish. What are you coming to exclude? So we say, you know what? Coming to exclude a goy. Says the Gemara. What do you mean to exclude a goy? Rabbi said, there was a goy that she's being accused of having an affair with. You can warn her off from the goy. You can warn from that. Interesting. There's a big machlekes in Ksubas of Gilman Beis and Taisus and Sanhedrin and other places. Abena Tam says that if she, a married woman, had an affair with a goy, then she is forbidden. Obviously, she sounds like forbidden to husband. And if this person becomes a ger, they cannot live together. And others disagree. They say that the fee of a goy is that the kaddish doesn't ask her husband, and if she becomes a ger, they can live together. Rabbeinu Tam, one of his proofs is from right here. We see here that we warn a woman, if she's a married woman, the husband can warn her off from being with a guy. So we see clearly from here that being with a guy would ask her for being with a husband. Anyway, says the Gemara says further, upaisel betruma, so going upaisel betruma mekan that a guy also one night stand with a guy She can no longer, with a coin, can no longer eat truma. Mekanla yodab shita obviously name out. I would have thought nitmo, the same thing. I would have thought it says nitmo twice. And since the gracious forbidden anyway with heicha the committee bahosnos listeners asner avol hahoyo sort of kind of here anyway she's not allowed to go. So maybe there's no laws of Sotah. A malay kamashlan that is. The goy now disqualifies her from going back home. If she's married to a Yisrael, while she's married to Yisrael, she's a bas kohen, she cannot eat truma, but the husband died, had no children, she can go back home. So commercial paisel truma pshita, obviously no. I would have thought it says bas kohen kisir. Bas kohen has relations with a strange person. It's a seer. Only somebody that she can marry. Teeth, Loshen Havaya, which is Kedushin, and somebody can marry. In somebody that she's entitled to marry guests. Somebody she's not entitled to marry does not in any way ask her. The guy passes her as well. Marrying a kohen from eating truma and so on. With Rabbi Yechon, how do you know if a goy had or ever had relations with a bas kohen or Levi Yisrael? She's possible from marrying a kohen and so on. Remember, it says a bas kohen kitiya almana bas kohen. If she becomes a widow or divorcee, she goes back home to her father. If she's living with somebody that if they die leaves her a widow, they die leaves her a divorcee, and then he goes back home. So if he has no children, she go back home to her parents. But a goy yotzer chum, a goy is an exception. The eved, the servant, the slave, ain't like almanas a but there's no almanas a by them at all. If she would have been married to a goy, there's no marriage, a recognizable marriage, only a divorce or anything. So therefore, she's not called a widow if he dies, and therefore she's not entitled to go back to her family. So the Gemara, the Elul Mutimai, go back to our Mishnah. Mishnah says, what does that mean? What does the Mishnah mean? Says the Gemara, somebody's not an Ish. What is not an Ish? The Mute Behema. If she had Znus, the Behema, if the husband warned her from having Znus with the Behema, there's no laws of sin. The angels Behema, because we don't recognize bestiality as Znus. And she does not become us as a husband. How do you know that a woman had Znus with the Behema? She's still allowed with the husband. It says a possibility, like Savi should not bring to the Mizbech as a carbon. If somebody gave a gift to a Zaina for having a relationship with her, that sheep that is given to her on account of that cannot bring to the Mizbech, obviously because it's an abomination. And also Mechei Kelef, if you swap a sheep for a dog, that sheep also is an abomination. You cannot bring it to Mizbech. The time of the Braisa. What about Oslam Kelef? What about if you gave her a sheep for having relations with a dog? That sheep you could bring to the Mizbech, but it's not considered nus. Or a Mechir Zaina, you swapped a Zaina. Let's say you had a Shifcha Zaina, you swapped it for a sheep. That sheep can be brought because again, why? It says Gam Shnei. Only two of them are forbidden. Those two. Osnan Zaina and Mechir Kelef. Not the other two. Shnaim la'abo. So we see clearly it's not considered as nus, and that's what we're coming to. So coming to exclude is nus for the behemoth. Said the Gemara, the Ella. So shiftas that if you say let's go back to the beginning of the page. You said that we can. So first of all, so we decided that when Mishnah says "Ein Ish" means the behemoth. So I think I'm going to ask a question. You said before, a person is a shach of somebody who's slightly impotent, that you can still warn her off. Why did the Torah use the expression shich to exclude what? Somebody produce shich. This person doesn't produce shich. You have to tell me that you can warn her off from him. So what shich we need to look at Tanya. We learned shich come to exclude in another way. If it's another method. And then that she's not really us. My Doveracha, what's his other method? If you warned her specifically, not that you shouldn't talk, you say clearly, I don't want you having a relationship the non-conventional way, and then that is a shich, that's not shich, and therefore she is not forbidden. What do we not forbidden? Mishkve ishiksi. When it comes to homosexuality, it says you shouldn't sleep with a male. Mishkve ishim plural. That means there's two ways of having interest in a woman. That means both ways are considered intimacy, and therefore, of course, it's forbidden to the husband. She cannot go back to the husband. Elam Rav says rather. Prat. You know what it comes to exclude? You warned her all that you shouldn't you shouldn't get close to her, touch each other's bodies. Now, the mother says, but if he touches other bodies, she's not really us as a husband. So what's the dinner site there? What's the warning? It's merely promiscuity. And that is not us from Torah, obviously also Rabbanon. And it shouldn't happen, but not us from the Torah. Abai said, Prat, you know what comes to exclude? Now, that's more than just touching each other's bodies, but touching each other's intimate parts. And come tell you that that you can warn her off from that, because that is us. If that happens, she'll be us. When is it all right that it's us? When is it? So therefore, it says over here that is not included. But this is not included if you hold the hara, which we say is only when you actually begin proper intimacy. Just touch is not really an aveda. That's why the pasuk comes tell you to say to exclude the shikha. Only shikha, but not if you just touch it. If you tell me the hara, just touching already the intimate part is considered already bia. Ma'ikal mem. What are we going to say then? Says the Gemara, really go back to the original answer. Why does it say shikha? It's talking about that they were just bodies touching each other. I thought about each other. What do you have to exclude that for? I would have thought the whole idea of Sotah is that the husband, it made a big issue out of it. It's totally solely up to the husband what bothers him. And the husband, when he says to her, I don't want you to talk to the guy, nothing really happened, just talking to the guy, and that's already forbidden. So this is even worse. Kamashlan, that no. Over there, when you're talking about talking, you don't mean only talking, mean the whole story. But over here, because he specified something which in itself is not awesome the Torah, therefore there's no law of Sotah. I'll stop over here. We'll continue tomorrow in this session.